Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on all the places, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, at Hawk Blogger. And folks, the NFL's back. The NFL's back tonight. We get to see the Cowboys face the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm really curious about this game. I expect it to be all Eagles, but the NFL, one of the wonderful things about it is it surprises you pretty consistently. And so who knows? Maybe Dak Prescott, maybe Kenny Clark, maybe CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. Maybe that's this combination that actually challenges the Eagles. Certainly going to be interested. Looking forward just to sitting on my couch and watching some NFL football tonight. So looking forward to that. If you haven't already given the show a like, click subscribe, please do. We're not completely out of the question to reach 25,000 subscribers before the game on Sunday. Right now, we need about 500 more subscribers here on YouTube, and I'll give away another pair of tickets to this game. We've already hit 10,000 followers on Instagram, so I've given away one pair of tickets. I'll tell you more about the people that got those tickets probably tomorrow. And then we can still give away more. So if you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Got a fun show today. So I had, a number of questions for Coach Mike Macdonald yesterday, and he provided some fascinating answers. And so I reached out to a good friend of the show, Coach Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com. I was like, hey, dude, can you come on and explain to me what you think Coach meant by this or that? And so there's a couple of those answers that we're going to get Cody in for. He should be here shortly, hopefully, if things work out. And I'll get his thoughts on some of that sound. But he had a lot of stuff that was did not need interpretation from a defensive mastermind like Coach Cody. So we'll play some of that, share that. I also have an interview that I did with Nick Emmanwori in the locker room yesterday. That one I thought was kind of interesting, and some of the things that he said and what will be his first game. And other than Gray Zabel, he might get the most run of the rookies out there. Obviously, Robbie Oots will be there in that conversation as well. So yeah, it's a lot of fun stuff. A lot of fun stuff we're going to take into account today, look through it. So looking forward to it. And as I say it, the man, the myth, Coach Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com and FieldVisionPro joins the show. Coach, how are you doing, man?
Doing good. Thanks for dealing with me on my mic issue. I couldn't get it started today.
Well, you're coming in loud and clear, so I'm happy to hear you. How's the family? Kids back at school, all that stuff.
Yeah, we've been back at school now for a couple of weeks. Oldest son just had his first 7th grade football game, so 18 quarterback, first play. Mom's a nervous wreck. I'm just up there, just trying not to yell at my dad, who's also the offensive coordinator. So just living the football dream is what I'm living.
Unbelievable. Are you involved in the coaching of this?
Not at all. No, I am a hands-off dad. I want him to enjoy football organically. It is nice though that my dad gets to be his coach. That's such a cool relationship. They're like best friends and they hang out with each other all the time. And my dad brings him home after school every day. So it's just a good relationship and it's a lot of fun.
I love that, man. I have to, talking to you makes me think of a conversation. I talked to a bunch of reporters from across the league to get ready for the season. And I talked to Brianna Dix, who covers the Tampa Bay Bucks now, but she's from Texas. And man, it's like it's part of elementary school there. She knew so much about football. It was awesome. And, just made me think of you and all that we get to learn from you on the show. So appreciate you, man. We won't keep you here forever today, but there were a couple bits of sound I would love you to hear. Sight unseen really is the wrong phrase, but I'll use that one. Get your reaction and your interpretation, and then we'll get you out of here and enjoy the rest of your day. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So the first thing I'm going to play for you here, and I'll bring it up on stage so we can watch it together, was Mike Macdonald. I asked him yesterday about unblocked pressures. And the reason I brought this up, Cody, was because the San Francisco 49ers actually gave up the highest rate of unblocked pressures last year in the league, about 9.6%. The Seahawks with Mike Macdonald actually created almost 14% unblocked pressures against the 49ers. And so you'll hear me ask in this clip, what I basically am asking, are all unblocked pressures the same? Are all pressures the same? But you hear the coach here kind of ask for a clarification on what I mean by unblocked pressures. And then he goes into an answer that I thought was interesting. So let's play this. Hopefully you guys can hear it just fine. Are all pressures created equal? Pressure that way versus pressure another way?
I think that it's a little bit of a, I mean, it sounds cool. It sounds like we're doing cool stuff, but like, I think it's a little misleading because the quarterbacks know when there's unblocked guys, and if they have answers for it, a lot of that might not be the best thing for that situation. So sometimes it is the better play is designing something where you can create a matchup or create a movement where you're going to win and the quarterback thinks he has time. And it's really a function of the situation and the play that the offense is in. So it's cool to have guys and put pressure on quarterbacks, speed the clock up. That there's definitely a time and a place for that. And there's a time and a place for Russian coverage or simulators or 5-man pressures where you're anticipating getting blocked and then you're trying to take advantage of how they're going to block you.
Jake Bobo still in the protocol?
So, curious, Cody. And by the way, I didn't play the part that I mentioned, which is he asked, when you say unblocked, are you saying about unaccounted for or when a guy wins? And I'm like, no, it's unaccounted for. So what did you take from that?
Yeah, this is an awesome clip, by the way. And really what he's explaining to you is pressure creation, what we're trying to do. And I'll go back. One of the hot topics right now is going to be the coffee house pressures that we saw during college football. Tennessee ran a really good one against Syracuse. Obviously, the Ohio State one against Texas. I was actually planning on doing something on coffee house pressures later this month, but because it's just a hot trend, I released it on today on Match Quarters and YouTube. So what a coffee house pressure is, it sounds crazy. And I'll get to why this is important, is because it is a fake dropout and then the guy reinserts. So it's that start-stop action. And so defensive language never makes any sense. That's why it's called coffee house, because you're standing in line at a coffee to get your coffee. Every single one that I found in the NFL from the past couple of years actually gets blocked. It's actually picked up. Here's the thing, and this is what Mike did. So why am I talking about this? This goes to what Macdonald is talking about, is that it's creating one-on-ones and it's creating leverage. And so the quarterback thinks he's safe and thinks I can go through the process, only to find out that as he steps up into the pocket, oh, that leverage that we just created for the defensive lineman is now back into it. So if you go and you watch the one that everybody's talking about from this weekend from Ohio State, the left tackle of Texas actually picks this blitz up. The problem is when Arch steps up into the pocket, it gives the defense the leverage to go back. And so Averill Reese was able to then go and get the quarterback. When you show max pressure or when you get a run through, what he's talking about is there's a lot of times they know where the gap is in their protection. They know where the alley is. And so when you're a defense and you're trying to design pressures, you do want to attack that alley, but you want to do it in a blind spot. Another good example of a pressure that was free, but probably should have been picked up was the Anthony Richardson injury. That was an edge pressure. They had a 5-man protection. He was sliding away from the pressure. He should have known to throw into the pressure. That's why everybody kind of was like, how are we still doing this? But a good example of that is, okay, you got a free runner off the edge, but there's nobody on the running back. Had he just flipped it to the running back really quickly, identified it, flipped it quickly, the offense now has leverage. That's what Macdonald's talking about there too is, okay, we manufactured this, but the offense also knows that he's coming, especially if the quarterback is a good quarterback. you throw into that pressure because you just voided a zone, you voided an area on the field. There's going to be some sort of a reaction back into it. You just gave them space. Offense is always going to find space. And so that's really what he's talking about. What he's talking about, and he mentioned it, you want to create a stunt, a movement, a matchup that creates an advantageous one-on-one. So the quarterback's trying to go through his process, but then, oh, by the way, now there's a defensive lineman camped on top of you with 2 seconds after the snap of the ball. And that's really what it is. You don't want to give these quick hitters, and you don't want to expose your secondary to quick throws down the field, because that's where they're throwing into space. And now we're rallying and tackling.
Interesting. So there's a lot there. I'm not going to try to understand coffee house pressures. That'll be for another show. I'll probably watch some of your stuff over at Match Quarters to learn on that, which is great. But so the notion here is, I think most people would just naturally think if you can get a free runner on a quarterback, that is the best thing you could do. That's a scheme-driven thing, and the defensive coordinators won. And interestingly, we're saying that's not necessarily the case, because they can be, like, a lot of times that's accounted for ahead of the snap. And just as a case in point, as I said, the 49ers faced a ton of unblocked pressures. Last year, Brock Purdy faced 51 unblocked pressures, the third most in the NFL. Only CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams faced more. But Brock Purdy completed 24 of 39 passes for 241 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception against unblocked pressures. In fact, the only other guy that tied him for the lead in touchdowns against unblocked pressures is Sam Darnold, who plays for the Seahawks. So, I want to touch on this a little bit more to make sure I understand. So, is the basic notion that a lot of times when there's an unblocked guy, the offense is almost wanting that, because that's taking somebody out of coverage, it's taking someone out of a slot, and they know exactly where to deliver the ball. And so it simplifies their read?
Yeah. And so to define what you're talking about as well, and what Macdonald is thinking too, is after the snap of the ball, there's literally a defender that has direct access to the quarterback. This isn't a pick pressure where we're going to pick, we're getting man blocking, we're picking an offensive lineman, and then we're looping somebody back, or we've created something where we're making them move, and then we're wrapping somebody back around to then create pressure. The only immediate pressure that really works is when you have immediate pressure in the face of the quarterback. So it has to come right through the A gap, which is right there by the center, and into pressure. So a lot of times you have to understand too, the NFL is a protection league. Most of these offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators are focused on the protections. And then how are we going to create one-on-ones off of that? So a lot of the times, these offensive coordinators, especially a guy like Shanahan, a guy like Kevin O'Connell, who you mentioned, both of their quarterbacks were really good against the blitz. They know where that alley is, and they know that defensive coordinators can't help themselves. They're going to send somebody through there. They're going to void a space down the field. And then the offense has predictably put a receiver in that spot. And so the quarterback just has to make sure that he throws around the blitz. Now, there are times, especially on the edge of the box, where the blitz is the actual coverage, meaning that we're like, you see this all the time on edge pressures, is we're actually going to work up the field and not at the quarterback. So we're actually going to cut off your one area, which is the flat. And so those are different types of pressures where it looks like, oh, this guy's free off the edge, but he's actually working vertical. Van Ginkel's a great example of this with the Vikings. He'll just go up the field, and then the quarterback will throw it to the flat and he bats it down, or he even gets a pick. And so, yes, you're right. It sounds counterintuitive, but the offense does know where they have a lack of protection. And if you can manufacture a run through an avoided zone, they're going to take advantage of it every time.
Interesting. Do you have time for me to play you one more sound?
Of course.
Coach? All right, let's put this back up there and we'll listen to this together. So this was a different question. This was about condensed splits. And what does those do for the offense? Why is it challenging for the defense? Here's what Coach said on that.
To do.
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, in the run game, it allows you to account for extra hats in the box. A lot of times it's free access in the pass game. In like the action game, it's to create some of the same angles that you have in the run game. Man, say access, timing, hats in the run game, probably the most. Those are challenges on defense. It's like, hey, how do you play these things? And when your count changes in time, like how do you apply your rules? And unfortunately, we get a lot of time on task for that type of stuff.
So, Coach, what is free access?
Yeah, so free access means uninhibited. There's nobody to them. So what he's basically talking about is that they now have access directly to our second and third levels without them having to work through. So the offensive line can essentially just take care of the D line. A lot of the things that you talked about too, from those condensed sets, the run action. So these crack blocks, these down blocks, all these blocks, they look the exact same as some of the routes that they're running off of these boot actions, these mesh routes, all of these things that are now part of modern football, they all look the same. So think of it like defenses right now are playing a lot from a too high shell. Why are they doing that? Because everything looks the same pre-snap. A lot of the rotations look the same post-snap. It's really muddy for the offense to get through. Okay. Condensed splits. It used to be a lot of defensive coordinators would not blitz a condensed split, would go zone against the condensed split. So it predictably makes you think of it almost as like in college, the ultra tempo used to just make defensive coordinators go, okay, we're playing base, right? It's kind of like that. And so it's been really a topic around defensive coaches for the past 3-4 years of, okay, how are we going to attack these condensed splits now that they are essentially part of, a majority, probably 50-50 part of this game? Now we have to be able to have actual things. And so that's where that free access comes from. The angles are there, and it really makes you soft on the perimeter. And so you have a lot of advantages for offenses to get really condensed.
And then he said something at the end there about changing your count in real time. Can you explain what he meant there?
Yeah. So if I go single high, right, and I go, okay, well, you got condensed. I'm gonna put 8 guys in the box, and we're gonna have that post safety in the middle of the field at like 15. Okay, the offense knows now exactly what that count is, and so passing wise, how do we?
I'm gonna pause you. What the count is? What is the count for the layman? What does that mean?
So tackle to tackle, how many people are located in that tackle to tackle box? So if you've ever seen an end zone shot, you're going to literally count how many people you have. And so when you do that and you go single high, you're putting 8 people in that box. And so you're trying to outnumber the offense. But the offense has access to now, they have 5 people that they can send out on a pass. And those guys can all go. And it doesn't even matter if you have 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, or if you have 11 personnel, 3 receivers, and only 1 tight end. It doesn't matter. Those guys can go out. And so you have to account for them in the passing game. And so changing to your number, if we are a too high shell with Cincinnati, which Seattle likes to do a lot, is how I have to now change that post snap. How am I going to get the safeties involved? Now my corners have to get involved, and so if you don't have a corner that necessarily wants to fit the run, or you don't trust to fit the run, that's a numbers advantage for the offense.
Interesting. One last question on this that's related to that. So Clint Kubiak in his time last year with the Saints forced the most base defense of any coordinator in the NFL. I think it was over 50% for the defense to play base. I assume that's because of use of fullback. But I'm curious, one, if that's a good assumption to make, and two, why? Why does that force base defense?
Well, you put a fullback on the field, you have, and the 49ers are a little different with use check, but you put a fullback on the field, typically that's a blocking back. He's not a tight end. He's not going to be going down the field. I don't have to worry about him running a vertical route down the field. He's not Travis Kelce or George Kittle that's, can run a receiver tree. So I'm going to match big body with a big body, and that gets me into base. The problem with base is that you are limited in what you can do coverage wise. because typically when you go base, whether let's say Seattle's a base 3-4 team, even if you go 4 down, you now have an extra big body. You have a linebacker, and typically that third linebacker is going to be somebody that you want essentially just anchored in a gap, right? I don't want him covering a tight end. I don't want him covering George Kittle. Well, the problem that you then get with that is, okay, well, I gotta drop safety down on the tight end now. Okay, well, so we've loaded the box, but what have we done? We've isolated outside. So both my corners are now isolated outside. I've now opened up a lot of that intermediate passing, which is, kind of that 10 to 20 yards in the middle of the field. Guess what? That's the target rich environment. That's where the modern offense wants to throw the ball. And I've given them everything. So if I can get you into base, I'm now paring down your playbook. Remember, there are only about 60 plays in an NFL game compared to a college game that has really from 75 to 90. So there are no throwaway plays. These are highly curated. They're highly pared down. These guys, we think that there's a lot of tendency. A lot of times the offense knows what the defense is doing. The defense knows what the offense is doing. Then it comes down to execution. And hey, I've got a guy that can beat your guy in that spot and in that area. And that's where the matchups come in. I mean, the NFL really is a matchup league. As much as we don't want to talk about it, it really is. And like Macdonald mentioned in the pressures, I'm trying to get one-on-one matchups. Well, the offense is doing the same thing. If I can get you in base, I'm going to isolate your corners. And now I'm also going to isolate a linebacker who probably is going to try and fit the run really, really quickly.
Last question. I'll let you get on with your day. So this matchup with the 49ers, Seahawks this week. And I've been looking at this, and the Seahawks are going to be trying to run the ball. There's no question about that. They're going to play some 12. They're going to play some 21. They're going to be heavy personnel quite a bit. You look at this 49ers defense, and I talking with some folks that cover the team. They're like, Robert Saleh might put five down linemen there. But I'm like, Kalia Davis and Jordan Elliott, and if they have to have 3 linebackers, it could be Luke Gifford out there as a third linebacker. Alfred Collins, CJ West, both rookies. Michael Williams, a rookie. Do you see like the 49ers as a team? Like this was one of the worst teams in the NFL at defending the wide zone last year, even though they go against it in practice all the time. Do you think the 49ers have the horses to be a good run defense this year?
I mean, I go look at what did the Jets do? They did play some base. I do think the way that you create 5-man surfaces is taking a guy like like a Luke Gifford and just put him on top of a tight end. And so we kind of create more of a solid edge right there. We can play with the front structures. I think the problem with the 49ers is that they had gone so far. They had solely relied on that wide 9, which is so super wide defensive ends. You have 2 really quick gap shooting, gap penetrating inside guys. Well, I mean, look, 3 years ago, they had the best D-line in the NFL. They had 8 first-round draft picks. So, yeah, it's awesome. Now that all those guys are gone except for Bosa. And so how are you going to be able to clean up the run? And I think you're right. That's going to be a matchup that's going to be to look at. The 5-man front stuff is a trend. And so that's a trend that you're seeing, but it's not the same 5-man front stuff that we saw with like a couple of years ago with the penny package, right? That we saw kind of the Rams do. The Rams do it still all the time, which is 5 down linemen, 2 edges, 3 interior guys, 1 linebacker, and then we have our nickel defense on the back end. You're finding out now that it's more or less a little bit more gamesmanship where I want to move that guy down late, basically like Frankie Louvu. Frankie Louvu really was an edge last year, but they label him as a linebacker because he plays linebacker, right? So that to me is where you're going to get that. Who's that guy going to be, right? Is it going to be D Winters? Are they going to really take Fred Warner out of what he does the best, which is essentially play that Mike linebacker and that coverage linebacker? So that's where I see like a guy like a Luke Gifford, or it could be D Winters, depending on who they feel is the best run stopper, is moving down into that kind of that old school Ted linebacker. Why they call it Ted? Because it has a TE in it. So where do you think he lines up? He lines up on the tight end. And you see this a lot of times in 4 down front. So maybe they go a little bit more old school. Maybe he goes a little bit more like the Rams and they play some 5 down fronts. I'm with you though. I don't see technically how they could get to that. I'm sure they will experiment with it, but that is definitely a matchup to look at.
Cody, what do you got coming up on matchquarters.com or on Field Vision Pro?
Yeah, so Field Vision Pro still exists. It's out there. If you're looking for a complement for PFF, much cheaper than that, we have that as well on Field Vision Pro. If you're a big stats nerd like me, in terms of just match quarters, I'll be covering. I've already broken down a lot of the stuff that happened this past week in college, and then I am just excited to get rolling with the NFL. I'll be covering all 32 teams. And if you are a nerd on defense, if you enjoy this conversation, head to matchquarters.com.
Man, appreciate you. I highly recommend folks check out the coach, _coach_A on Twitter, and all the stuff at matchquarters.com. Have a great one, man. Football's back.
You too. Thanks for having me on, man.
All right. That is Coach Cody Alexander giving us all sorts of great insights there. And, I loved what we got from Mike Macdonald yesterday, and there's a bunch more I want to play from him, but I wanted to get Cody in here to talk about a few of those. So let's go through some of the other sound we got from the coach yesterday, and he was very generous in his answers that he gave. This was a question I asked him about how much time does he spend in the offseason studying his divisional opponents? And here's what the coach said about that.
Significant amount. I would say it's you kind of you work through like big picture, and then you kind of keep opening and widening and narrowing the lens. I wouldn't say like, hey, this day I do that, but it's a consistent. You have to keep a pulse on the league. You have to keep a pulse on your division. Those are the guys that tiebreakers come down to. I mean, obviously wins in the division mean a lot for your end goals, but it's both.
So, part of the reason I asked him that is because I had a feeling he spends a lot of time there, just based on some of the conversations I've had with him during the off season. And I think this is a situation where the Seahawks have a coach that is absolutely a grinder. And I actually asked Cooper Kupp a question about this yesterday, and maybe I'll try to find that sound as well. Like, why don't I do that? You guys won't mind if I take a second and try to find that. But he's just always on. Yeah, here it is. All right, let me share this with you guys. I found it pretty quick. This is Cooper Kupp. I asked him yesterday, all right, so you played for maybe the best offensive mind in the game, and now you play for one of the best defensive minds in the game. What's similar about the way they think, and what's maybe different? Here's what Cooper Kupp said.
Yeah, well, I think they're always, like, you can see that they're always on. It's just like constantly like searching for, what's the next thing going to be? Is there a weakness here? Is there something that I'm missing, or something I'm not seeing, or is there a better way to do it? And it just seems like it's constant, like, and with both, it's not even just with football, or like their side of the ball. It's like, it is the coaching side of things. Like, how can we communicate better? How can we just be better in the building? And it's as a player, it's like, man, you want to be around guys like that. Like, then they're just like, they're pushing the envelope. They want to be ahead of everything. It's like they're not okay sitting back and saying, well, if someone else is, they're not okay with the thought that someone else is doing it better than they are, And so I really appreciate that. I really love that mindset, and it makes it fun as a coach, as a player, to be able to be a part of it.
So, I mean, part of what I'm like, just appreciating, part of what I wanted in a coach when the Seahawks were looking for their next coach is one of these brilliant, young, driven guys that not only can put time on task, because I think every coach works their tail off in the NFL. I don't think that there's a lot of guys that are screwing around. Like, so I wouldn't want to imply that, but the quality of that time and what they do with the information that they get from their analysis, I think that's part of what separates. And then figuring out how to apply that knowledge and communicate and install things that actually make a difference. I think the Seahawks got one of those guys. Like, that's what got me so excited about them hiring Mike Macdonald. I don't think there's an unending supply of those kinds of people. And then on top of it, Mike Macdonald's a good guy. Like, I think he's a relatable guy. Yeah, he's a little stiff at times. He's not the most effusive, but it's actually pretty funny yesterday. He got a few laughs during the press conference. But I just, I am really eager to see what Mike Macdonald's mind, with a full season of being in the NFC West and then a full off season of going back and studying his foes, how that's going to pay dividends this season. We'll find out. I think the first week, again, it's very misleading. So I'm not going to like assume everything's good or bad based off the first week, although I'll probably completely overreact because that's the fan in me. But I think that's just a huge advantage of having a guy like Mike Macdonald on your, coaching your team. So similarly, I asked him yesterday, so when you've played a good defensive game, you look back on it and you're like, yeah, we did what I would hope we would do. How often is that something you'd attribute to the game plan that you came in with versus adjustments you made during the game? And I was worried he was going to answer like the cop out of like, well, it's less about the coaches and more about the players, but he didn't. And I'm glad he didn't. And I'm glad I didn't have to like take that. I almost said, take players out of it, but I didn't say that. And so here's what he said about whether it's the prep or whether it's the adjustments in game.
Well, I think initially the function, if we can go in with a very simple, clear objective on what we're doing, that helps us get off to a fast start. But the NFL these days, you have to do a great job of diagnosing of, hey, this is what they're trying to attack. This is what we're playing well. These are things we need to avoid. You're not going to be perfect starting games out. I mean, the record shows that we're not perfect starting games, trying to be better, but it's both. It's how you start the game, the clarity. Can you start fast? And that's not just like whether or not you're in right plays. It's, guys there's a lot of things that go into how you start a game, how well your guys are playing, how well they execute, etc. But it's a lot of, I would say there's decisions that are made throughout the game too that are critical in how well you end up closing games out.
So, I mean, the answer is to some extent can be both. Like that, I knew was coming one way or another, but I thought he gave an interesting answer there about the clarity that they try to provide at the start. Some of the other guys jumped on that, asked for more information about, whether it's simple or, simplifying. He's like, it's less about being simple. It's more about being clear about what you're trying to do. And I see that in these games. I mean, we've all seen that where it is this active. I mean, I would love to get sound from the headphones during a game, because it is just one of the things I love about football and why I picked, I used to watch every sport, every level all the time. Like it just consumed me. After you have kids and you get married and job, you have to kind of narrow some things down about where you're going to spend your time. And football was what lasted for me as the thing I'm not going to give up any, like NFL football. And part of the reason is I just love the chess match, right? Like the adjustments that are made, the ways that teams come in and attack, the fact that for the most part, teams are going to do what they do. They're going to use a Mike Macdonaldism. They're going to throw their fastball, but there's times where you have to adjust real in the moment. And I think that, Mike Macdonald's a guy that I think my interpretation of that answer was absolutely you want to get clarity going in, but you just have to know you're going to be making adjustments throughout. And the people that do well in the NFL are the ones that are able to think in real time to make those adjustments. And, I think I like to think Mike Macdonald's one of those guys. And so then there's this other question I asked. I was very mouthy yesterday. I just had a lot of things on my mind, and I wanted to get Coach's perspective on it. This was me talking. You guys have heard me talking about the fact, and I showed this on the tail of the tape yesterday with Grant Cohn. Highly recommend you check out that episode if you missed it. I thought we went through a bunch of great stuff. Always great with Grant, and I was throwing in a bunch of data. Make sure you check out Tail of the Tape, the written article on hawkblogger.com. I went into the 49ers transition that they're going through and threw out some stuff that I found really interesting as I was doing the research. So highly recommend you check out the article. But anyway, I talked about the fact that the 49ers went from 2019 to 2021, earlier in the Shanahan era, their first Super Bowl under Shanahan. They were 31st in the NFL in early down pass rate. And now, last year, they're up to 13th. And the trend is very clear. It's basically since Brock Purdy that early down passing rate has increased. And so I asked Mike Macdonald kind of a twist on this question. What I wanted to ask him is, I told him this trend or this change, and I'm like, how do you know when to trust that this is actually a change that is going to stick versus maybe an aberration that maybe they'll return back to what they used to be? And here is what the coach said in answering that.
Interesting. It's probably personnel driven. Probably speaks to their confidence in the quarterback Purdy and how well he's playing and how decisively he plays. It's probably the number one thing, probably driver behind it. I think it's also different based on the team, what type of run pass tendencies, things like that. You can go down some deep holes now when you're trying to research, whether they're going to throw it or pass it. And those are like the risks that you're weighing in your mind as you're calling games. And it's interesting. I mean, that's we spend a lot of our time on how we call defenses and how they're going to operate. But my exposures with San Francisco in the last couple of years, it's very evident how confident they are in their quarterback.
Yeah. I saw that clip made it into 49ers Twitter. I think they were happy to hear that. And I think Mike's right. I mean, obviously he's right. He knows about this more than I do, but that was my read of it as well. I mean, the trend is basically you overlay that with Purdy's time as quarterback, and that Venn diagram is a circle. So I think this has a lot to do with Kyle Shanahan trusting his quarterback more than he ever has, at least in San Francisco. And I think there's reason for doing that. Brock Purdy, I don't fully understand why he gets so much negative reaction from folks. I've seen enough. I think one of the times that I just really understood that, oh man, they got so lucky. They got a good quarterback with the last pick in the draft was his first time playing in Seattle. It's not an easy environment to play, even though the 49ers were, a much better team overall. But there was a possession where they were backed up in their own end zone, and I think they might have even gotten a penalty or a sack, and it was long, there was a lot of yards to gain, and he just stood in the pocket and delivered a dime, and they got out of that. I think they might have even scored on that possession. It doesn't even matter, but I was like, almost every quarterback, let alone every young quarterback and every first few starts quarterback, would make a mistake in that situation, or at best, you just kind of try to get to a punt. And this guy, he's fearless in that regard. He's so resourceful. He is a playmaker. He's such a competitor. All the things that I saw all of that come out, and I was like, oh no, oh no, they got a good one. That sucks. And so, yeah, I believe in Brock Purdy. At the same time, I saw some games at the end of last year where I was like, oh, he looks like the guy everyone else says they think he is. He's missing some easy throws against the Rams on Thursday Night Football. Neither team played well on offense, and there was some bad weather, but late in that game, he was just making some awful throws, and he turned the ball over a lot last year. So We'll see. I think one of the things that differentiated Brock Purdy early on in his career from a Jimmy Garoppolo is Jimmy Garoppolo was dependable in that he was going to turn the ball over at least once a game, whether it was a fumble or an interception. You knew it was coming. Brock Purdy was not that way. He was able to be a playmaker while reducing the risk because his decision-making was good. His accuracy was better than I think Jimmy Garoppolo's. And so you get more reward and less risk. And that's part of what I think made Brock Purdy a $50+ million a year quarterback. All right. A couple more bits of sound. So I also asked the coach yesterday about like, hey, last year you guys had a really good record on the road, but you had a pretty bad record at home. How much do you kind of associate that with just the opponents that you played versus things that you can control? And here is what the coach said.
Well, we spent a lot of time studying it, and we're constant. We're tweakers. We're kind of, you say chasing edges. We're always trying to figure out what's the best way to do stuff. So we're tweaking our away schedule too. We're treating our we've looked at our home operation from Friday to Sunday. As something as different as like, how do we get the guys to eat more frequently? Like how can we help control that? I mean, we're kind of looking at everything. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that we've changed. But it's not like wholesale shifts. You're I say moving and shaking all the time about, hey, what's just the best for us and this team. So yeah, we're making those decisions all the time, especially at home.
So I have to admit, I almost made the thumbnail today, Mike Macdonald as a tweaker. I did. I thought about it, but my more mature self showed up, and I knew that was going to get people's attention when he said that. But anyway, look, I'm glad to hear that the team's putting this much thought into how they're going to be better at home. Like, it matters. At the same time, I think it's a lot simpler than that. I think if you really look at why they were a losing team at home, it's because they faced the Bills, the Vikings, the Packers. You face some really good teams at home, and on the road, you're facing the Patriots and, a fair number of other teams that just weren't that good. And so I believe that's part of why there was this home road disparity. At the same time, look at the 49ers home and road last year. At the home, the 49ers pretty much beat the rails off of the Seahawks. And then on the road, the Seahawks won that game. I don't think that's a home and road thing. I think that was a personnel change. I think the Seahawks were a much, much different team the second time that they played the 49ers. I don't know if eating more would have changed anything in the first outcome against the 49ers. So, I'm glad they put some thought into it. I'm glad it's a conversation among the team. And one of the things that I can share, because I think people were curious, he mentioned during the press conference that they had done some changes to the room in there. And I want to show you guys a video that Brady Henderson posted of the changes to the room. Let me pull this up. I will share this, and I'll make this full screen so you guys can see it all. But this is the meeting room that we do in the media for the team meeting room as well. But you'll see they've added pictures of Lumen Field and the fans on both sides. So here you go.
Decorations or auditorium, I think it's pretty sweet. But yeah, excited.
So you can see there's Jen Mueller, but you can see they've got this up of one side of Lumen Field, and then on the other side, there's Dave Pearson. You got the other side of Lumen Field on the other. So people had asked about that, so I figured I'd show that to you guys so you had some idea of what the difference was. And they're really trying to make home field like a really clear part of what they're doing. And I think that's pretty, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, you definitely heard it from all the players as well. Last sound I'm going to play. So he was asked, last sound, at least from Mike, I'm going to play. He was asked, like, did they make these changes, the home field stuff, based off of just like the coaches said, or was that something that the players had input into? And listen to the coach's answer on this one.
Actually, I got some great feedback. Hey, they can encourage me to say whatever you feel like we need. Tell us on that, and we'll do it. So they've been awesome, which is normal. It's a little different than how you normally operate. Normally, you kind of give them a couple options and they pick the best one, or you run it by them first. But they encouraged me to just make the decision on this one.
So that was interesting. I mean, interesting that I hadn't had the insight before that they typically would give the players a few different options and they would pick. To hear that the players were like, no, you just tell us what to do. Maybe I'm just overly positive about most things, but part of my read into that is that the players trust him, and just want him to think through that. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting insight. And obviously he said there's a lot of turnover on the leadership council that they have. He didn't obviously to say who, but you can assume Cooper Kupp's on that now. You can assume Sam Darnold's on that now. Probably DeMarcus Lawrence is probably on that now. And that's a pretty big change. He did mention that Jaron Reed's still there and Leonard Williams still there. So yeah, like even if you think of who the leaders are on this team, I think it's probably a pretty different mix than what you had last year, where I'm pretty sure Geno Smith was on that and Tyler Lockett was probably on that kind of thing. It's just a difference. So that was cool to hear. So yeah, I thought just lots and lots of great stuff from the coach yesterday. A couple things I will offer as well. I hear all the time, Jen Maz, very loyal patron. So big fan of Jen's. Everybody always is like, man, the sound quality for these things sucks. And why was it so much better yesterday? Well, yesterday was the first day where we went back to doing these at the podium inside the team meeting room. I'm not a sound engineer, but I can tell you that miking up sound is a lot easier when it's in a closed space than when you're outside and there's music blaring and people walking by and all this other stuff. So, I will never be the one to solve this problem for the Seahawks. I know it's a frustrating thing for a lot of fans, but that's why the sound was better, and it should continue to be. So today I'll be back down at the VMAC. We will have Sam Darnold will have his press conference. And then also we will get to talk to the coordinators later today, which I'm really looking forward to. So get to talk to Clint Kubiak, talk to Aden Dirty. We'll also get more time in the locker room. There'll be some more players that do press conferences today. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more coming today. So keep an eye out. There might be something that I share. We won't be talking to Coach Macdonald. They'll release another injury report based off what we saw yesterday. I don't think the injury report's like a must-watch thing. Generally speaking, I think it's going to look the same today as it looked yesterday. And Friday is really the day to start paying attention to see, which of these guys they think is going to play. I generally am not expecting Uchenna Nwosu to make it. Not because he's had any setbacks, but just because they're probably going to take it slow and not try to, do all of these things at once and like make sure this guy's back for good. But we'll find out. We'll find out about that. And I mentioned last night on Real Hawk Talk about this continued rumor that the 49ers are going to have over 50% of the fans at Lumen Field. I said last night, that's just not even close to true. Vivid Seats that Lombardi and those other, I don't have good things to say about David Lombardi, so I'll just stop there. But anyway, Vivid Seats is the company that was projecting that. Vivid Seats has 3% of the seats at Lumen Field. And so they only have data for their stuff. It is a marketing ploy. And so if you want to say over 50% of 3% of the stadium is going to be 49ers fans, then fine, but that's not really news. And the data I have is that it will be roughly half the 49ers fans in the stadium this year as there were a year ago when they came up here. And even in that heavily dense personal seat license space on the 100 level, on the visitor side, which is where the cameras usually are looking, that's usually going to be the highest density of visiting fans because that's where the personal seat license are, which is where the ticket brokers have owned those, and this team cannot revoke those because they sold licenses. It's a whole thing. But anyway, last year, the 49ers, I think, roughly had 40% of that section, is why it looked so red. I think it's going to be closer to 20 to 24% this time. So again, basically half the 49ers fans as last year. At the very most, you're talking about, I think, 10 to 12%. And I think it's going to end up being lower than that, 49ers fans in the stadium. And regardless, like, the fact of the matter is, this is why we have hbtix.com. Go there, sell your tickets to Seahawks fans, buy your tickets from Seahawks fans, and let's get as many Seahawks fans in the stadium as possible. I have one more. I'm going to play this Nick Emmanwori locker room interview for you. I think you guys are going to like this. Before I do that, I want to talk to you about Sleeper app, who's a sponsor of the show. I think one of the things that's really cool about Sleeper is it's not just a fantasy sports app. I think it's a great way to experience and connect together over sports. And I don't know about you guys, but sports, to me, one of the reasons I love sports is it's one of those things where you can come across, gender, race, economic, religious, political boundaries, and just kind of share a jersey and cheer together as a community, which, man, it's just hard to find. And so I love that about sports. And Sleeper, I think, kind of build some of that into their experience. It's a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. You can celebrate and chat with other people on games in real time with other users. You can get scores, news, alerts, all there at your fingertips. You can play in your fantasy leagues. I think they got great stuff for fantasy leagues, and win real money if you take advantage of the picks aspect. I did my picks last night with Josh Cashman and Evan Hill, and all you got to do, use promo code HAWKS, HAWKS, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, let's go ahead and play this Nick Emmanwori sound for you, and make sure I've got this up here. All right, so I interviewed a bunch of the guys yesterday in the locker room, and let me play this full Nick Emmanwori interview. It's only a few minutes, and then I'll share what kind of stood out to me about it. All right, here we go. First game, Seahawks, 49ers at home. How much do you know about the background of this rivalry between these two teams?
I know a little bit. I don't know too much, but I know they had some back and forth back in the LOB days, and played each other a couple times, like the championship game. So I don't know too much though.
So, typical of an offense, they're going to look to target rookies. They're going to test you out. What are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I get paid for. Got to earn my check. So I'm ready this Sunday, and I'm gonna go out there, do what I have to do. All those guys, you see them on TV, but in person, they got to earn my respect a little bit. That's how I look at it. Like, sure, I know about George and Christian McCaffrey, Brock, but they got to earn my respect on the field too. So that's how I feel.
Would it be natural for anyone to have a little bit of butterflies, nerves that first time? What do you think is going to be the moment where you settle in? Your first hit, your first pass breakup? What's going to be the moment where things just start being football again?
That first tackle for sure. That's how it's always been growing up, from Pee-wee, middle school, high school, college. So now that first tackle I get, that's when my blood gonna start flowing and I get in that hunting mode. So
All right, last question. When was the first time you, as a kid, little Nick, started thinking, man, maybe I'll be an NFL player one day?
I think I was sitting on my couch in middle school. It was in middle school. I was sitting on my couch, and I didn't really have like a lot of offers, but I do remember this moment. I was like a 3-star or barely even that. I was just trying to get some traction and going. I ain't had no offers. I seen other dudes getting offered and stuff, and I was sitting on my couch, and I was like, man, I think I'm gonna be. I know I'm gonna be all right, man. I ain't worried about the offers of 5-star, none of that. I literally had a vision, like sitting on my couch in middle school, about where I was gonna be at right now, like being in the NFL, trying to become a big time player. So.
Well, little Nick gets to be Big Nick, Big Nickel. Good luck in your first game, man. Appreciate your time.
So appreciate
All right,
it.
thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, that was Nick Emmanwori, generously giving me some of his time before practice yesterday. And the thing that stood out to me about that is he talked about that it's not just a matter of, he wants to earn respect. He's like, these guys got to earn his respect. And I don't think that's really locker, like bulletin board material, but I think it's an interesting view into his mindset as a player and just how confident he is. I think Earl was a lot like that, to be honest. I get a little bit of the Earl just vibe from Nick Emmanwori. I'm not saying they're the same player at all, but just from a demeanor perspective, this guy has a lot of belief in who he is and what he brings to the football field. I think that can be really good. Ultimately, I think it could be really challenging, potentially initially, because this league humbles a lot. Pretty much everybody gets humbled in this league before they start to see and learn what they need to do in order to be the player that they're meant to be. So I've said it before. I won't be surprised if Nick has some moments of struggle or mistake in his first game or his first season. But I still think ultimately this is a guy that not only has just unreal athleticism, but has been a great worker, great teammate so far, fit in with the locker room. I think everything looks very positive with the long-term view here. Question is, like, how quickly can he be a positive factor for the Seahawks on the field? And we're going to get to find out in a few days. So tomorrow I will be bringing in Mike Sando and Dave Bowling for our weekly Friday conversation. I can't wait to talk with the fellas. Always great to hear their stories and just break down what's going on across the NFL. So we'll be there for that. Saturday will be Seahawks Saturday with Jeff Simmons. So we'll have that. And then Sunday's football. Sunday is football. I cannot wait. We'll definitely have a post-game show, win or lose. Let's hope it's win. And we'll have some fun with that. So I see that there are some super chats. Let me make sure I get to those before I get out of here. Nico Skodokris has become a member. Well, welcome to the crew. Great to have you. Bryce Coots from the Hawk's Eye, who's done very courageous things. Bryce has been a big supporter of the show, and I think he's starting a new channel, the Hawk's Eye. So make sure you check it out. And I could tell you from personal experience, it takes a ton of work to start something from scratch. And I respect that Bryce is doing that. So good luck to you, man. Says, hey, Brian, great guest. I love listening to Cody talk defense. So insightful, great content. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And good luck on your venture. Brent Yoendo says, the video's thumbnail is some of your finest work. I've always assumed Mike was in a lab coat behind the scenes. No longer have to imagine that visual. Well, I'm glad you like it. I had fun making it and appreciate the comment. So, all right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I'm Brian M. Hauser. Take care.